Lovely. So welcome everybody. Right, here we go. Hackney Voluntary and Community Sector Grants Programme. I apologise to people who've already sat in other sessions, but I am just going to whiz through I am going to do something around the wider programme as well, just in case this is the only session you've been able to come to. But I'll go quite quickly through those so that we have plenty of time to actually focus on the community infrastructure grants. Okay, thanks, Jenny. Next slide. So we're going to be using some terms just to so that you understand what it's called. VCS, we'd say VCS all the time, it's voluntary and community sector. We do tend to kind of interchange between organisation and group, we're usually referring to the same thing. Grant agreement, we're talking about that's the actual legally binding agreement that we have with organisations once we've agreed to release funds. Schedule is part of a grants agreement, such as a copy of your budget, and request is your request for funding, often interchangeably with project or application. Request, I think, comes from our software system that we use. So in this session, I'm just going to do some introductions so you know who the team are. I'll ask Seb just to say hello. The main purpose of this is to give you an overview of the community infrastructure grants, and we'll go through things like eligibility, what we can't fund, how the application process will work, when you can apply, some more guidance around just taking through the different stages and what happens next. And then, as I said at the end, there'll be opportunity for questions. Okay, so if we so some of the team are actually having a break, which is great. They're on a bit on leave because the work leading up to the launch of the grants on the 7th of February was incredibly intense. So the first on the list, Caitlin, who many of you all know, the Senior Grants and Investment Officer, she's actually on holiday. As I've said, I'm Claire Whitney. I'm a strategic lead in the wider policy and strategic delivery service, which sits in the Chief Exec's department, and the grants team sits within that wider team. Jenny, did you want to say hello?
Hi, yes, I'm going to correct the spelling of my surname there, which is Z-I-E. It's a really tricky one, but hello everyone, it's really lovely to see you all. I do know some of you, I look forward to getting to know others of you, but I'm one of the other strategic leads in the team with a focus on change and transformation, including the way that we work with our partners across the system to support our most vulnerable residents. So really, really excited about this new grant and working with you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. And Moyo.
I'm Moyo Adeneye, and I'm a Grants and Investment Officer. I know most of you will know me. I work in the grants team. Thank you.
Probably everybody knows Moyo. If they know anybody, they know Moyo. Lisa Atamian, who's our Grants and Investment Officer, many of you will know. She's also on annual leave at the moment. Sue. Has Sue joined us? Oh, hello, Sue.
Hi there. My name's Sue Brown. I'm a Strategic Delivery Officer supporting the grants team at the moment. Hi, everyone.
Thanks, Sue. And last but not least, Thomas.
Hi, I'm Tom Shaw. I know some of you from previous work. I'm another Senior Grants and Investment Officer in the team.
Lovely. Thank you. So next slide, please, Jenny. So the grants programme, what we have learned. Well, we've learned a lot, I have to say, over the last year. I mean, much of our learning actually started, I think, when we started to develop the voluntary and community sector strategy. And that really identified a need to change the way that we invest in the sector. But our experience during COVID-19 has really cemented that and giving us a lot of evidence that actually what we were being told that helped us inform the voluntary and community sector strategy actually became very evident through the pandemic. And so our learning from the pandemics really kind of helped us to focus on how we need to fund differently. But also we've had a refresh of our council's corporate plan, and that's provided a kind of clearer set of priorities that are much closer aligned to our grants programme priorities. So it feels like we're really kind of heading in the right direction. Next slide, please, Jenny. So so this is an interim year. So we're taking time to pause after the pandemic. as I've said, we've learned that we need to change the way we were funded, and the pandemic really showed us the importance of collaboration, of partnering in order to achieve the best outcomes for residents. And that's what we mean by the way that we fund, in terms of like changing the nature of the relationships. And it's really useful to have a grants program, our grants programs aim, and a refreshed corporate plan that are much more closely aligned. Because it's helped in that way. The grants program helps to deliver the priorities of our corporate plan. What we've got here is the list of our corporate plan priorities, and I think if you read through them, you'll see the VCS is really well placed in its ability to reach and work with some of our most disadvantaged and vulnerable residents of the borough, and is therefore often your best place to provide a service or to ensure that other services are accessed. So funding for the sector is we think best deployed to fully realise the sector's potential and play to those strengths. And the priorities of the grants programme support the wider agenda of the council and of our partners, and that has a real focus on intervention and prevention. So the refresh of the corporate plan, which was in the summer of 2020, which was to make sure that our priorities, the council's priorities, really did help us focus on the right immediate pandemic response, as well as the work that was needed to respond to the longer term impacts of coronavirus. And we know that's going to be felt for many years in our community. So part of that reset was about looking at everything through a kind of golden thread of inequalities, disproportionality, vulnerability, poverty, as well as taking a very honest look at how we need to work differently. And cross-cutting all of those things listed there, poverty reduction, rebuilding an inclusive economy, is the need to keep in focus the most vulnerable and key inequalities. And when we talk about that, we're talking specifically about racial inequality. Next slide, Jenny. So where are we now? We've learned, as we said, we learned a lot from the consultation and engagement with the sector prior to and during the pandemic, and we've used this to begin to make some changes to the grants programme. But given the challenges of the last 2 years, we really wanted to use this interim year to keep the majority of the programme as it is, with some minor changes. We don't want to. It's a really difficult time for organisations. Everyone at the moment. We don't want to cause further instability to the sector at a difficult time, but we do need to look at implementing longer term changes going forward to the grants programme, just to be able to address all those challenges. And I think what's really important, and I'll say this, please do engage at the opportunities, because the engagement we did to inform the voluntary and community sector strategy has really been very powerful, and really helped us to develop a strategy that really it felt was shared, and people felt that we were going in the right direction. So it's really important when there's opportunity to feedback at each stage of the process around us reviewing these grants, that you help shape the future of them. So I just wanted to sort of ask for your contribution. When there are opportunities, please do take part and help us to shape the future of the grants programme. Next slide, Jenny. What's this one? All right. So longer term. So looking at the longer term, what's on here is really some key principles I think that we need to keep in mind when we're thinking about how the council should be investing in the sector in the future. We're planning to review the grants programme over the next 6 to 12 months. So it is an ongoing process. We've already started, but it's not a kind of stop and finish thing. We want to get to a point probably within the next 12 months where we're a bit clearer about what we want to do longer term. But we want to keep this as an open conversation, and we want to continue to collaborate and to make sure we get it right. So there'll be further opportunities, as I said, to build in engagement, but also we really want to build in equality-focused and anti-racist approaches to the delivery of the programme. Next slide, Jenny. So just to recap, you've probably seen this many times if you've applied for a grant from the council. We have a couple of programme aims to promote social inclusion, encourage independence and develop personal resilience, and to build positive relations between different groups and communities that will maintain the high levels of community cohesion in Hackney. And the kind of actions that kind of flow from that are those which aim to narrow the gap in outcomes between certain disadvantaged groups and the wider community. And you could probably see from that how that aligns to that list that was in our corporate plan. There's much closer alignment now between what we're trying to achieve in the grants programme and what's in our corporate plan. Thanks, Jenny. Next slide. So just to remind people, if you haven't been in any of the other information sessions, there are a number of schemes that are open schemes for grants. So we have closed schemes for advice services, which is only open to advice providers. But these are the open schemes that are open at the moment. There's project grants, which include funding from the Children and Young People's Fund. There's community chest grants, and there's the community infrastructure grants, which we're going to talk about a bit more about today. And if you need any more information, there'll be some more detail about those other parts at the bottom of the presentation. Next slide, please, Jenny. So what we're going to talk about is community infrastructure grants today. I'm going to bring in Jenny because Jenny's going to be leading specifically on this strand of the community infrastructure grants over the next few months. So that's through the process of the application and assessment, etc. But Jenny's going to explain a little bit more about what's involved, because it is a new stream, and it's it will need some explaining, and we want you to really understand what we're looking for. So Jenny, did you want to jump in?
Thanks, Claire. So this funding really does seek to build on the work that's evidence that so many of you have been real leaders on in the community during the pandemic, that's helped to identify vulnerability, engaging residents in the response to COVID-19 and reducing pressures on the council and health services. So the purpose is that it will enable the voluntary and community sector to continue to be able to collaborate with each other in the way that they have done, and with the council, to provide the best help for residents. So really focused on those outcomes for residents and that partnership working. The grants will be unrestricted revenue funding, although we expect organisations to collaborate with us on determining what they will use the funding for. There are 2 stages to the application. Organisations can be based in and serve a particular area of the borough, or community-led borough-wide organisations, or they may be both. And joint partnership bids are accepted for this. So the grant is just for 1 year, and grants are up to a maximum of 45,000, although grants to organisations with an annual turnover of 250,000 and above will be capped at 25,000. So we anticipate that most grants will be in the region of somewhere between 10 and 25,000. But as Claire said, our hope is that there's a lot of learning from this 1 year, and that although we only have 1 year for this bit, that it really is gives us something to continue to build on. Okay, I'll just switch to the next slide. So I was actually just Googling this as well, in terms of how we define community infrastructure. And I found quite a helpful definition that was around the sort of structures, facilities and systems built at community level that are critical for sustenance of lives and livelihoods. And we've really seen that during the pandemic in the way that that so many of you have worked together to meet those needs, and that can be low cost, small scale, built over time through community-led initiatives according to the needs and aspirations of the community population. And I thought that was quite a nice definition, just to sort of add to our understanding of what we're talking about here. For the purpose of this grant, we are defining what we mean by community infrastructure as the use of expertise and knowledge of communities, person-centred ways of working, with a lot of trust from residents, to provide significant outcomes for people who are not part of an organisation's everyday services or projects. So really quite different than the way that a lot of funding, project funding works. So this is for organisations that help identify vulnerability, engage residents in the response to COVID-19 and reduce the pressure on council and health services, and organisations that put a lot of time and energy into collaborating meaningfully with each other and with the council to provide the best help for residents. What it's not is for campaigns, second tier or umbrella organisations or pan-London activity. I don't know if you wanted to come in and say a bit more about that, Claire, in case there was any sort of...
No, that's fine. That was put in because there were some questions asked earlier on when we were just saying, oh, could this be misconstrued? So we just wanted to be really clear about what it wasn't for. Thanks, Jenny.
Thanks, Claire. Okay, so should your organisation apply? That's a big question. So the criteria in the application and the example case studies should make it easy for you to see if you're an organisation that would be considered for the grant. You should be able to easily answer most of the questions in the expression of interest and have lots of examples to draw on that you could use for the case studies that you submit. We recognise, due to structural inequalities and racism, that we need to level this playing field and ensure a focus on the most vulnerable and key inequalities, specifically racial inequality, when considering expressions of interest. So over to the questions. So this question is really an opportunity for you to tell your story, tell us the story, so we can really understand how your organisation works with residents and what it does to address the often various and complex needs they have as a result of poverty, racism, trauma, etc. So the key questions, one, so it's important not to just describe how you do this, but provide some evidence of this. What is it that you do that is person-centred and helps contribute to meeting a resident's whole needs, not just a particular need that your organisation meets through its services? So the question is, please tell us how your organisation tries to work holistically or in a person-centred way to meet residents' needs. We appreciate funding constraints may make this more difficult. What do you do to try to overcome this? And how does this make a difference to Hackney residents and communities? So this question will really help us to understand how you meet those wider needs of residents you work with by doing more than just delivering the projects or services that you are funded to deliver. So it's an opportunity to really, really talk about those bits that we're not as often able to. Thanks. Oh, was that an accidental hand? Yeah, we'll have time for questions at the end. So there's only 3 questions, but question 2 is really focusing on the residents that you work with and how you use your expertise and knowledge to achieve the best outcomes for them. This question is about the people you reach with your work, as well as the skills and experience your organisation has to do this. And this is a chance to tell us, what is it about your organisation that residents in Hackney come to you for more than just what you're funded to deliver in terms of project-based grants? So what is it about the way you work, who you are, and how you're working with residents that really gives you that reach? And the last one is a question about collaboration and partnership, and an opportunity for you to really describe the ways that you've worked with other voluntary and community sector partners and council and health services and any of those collaborations that have been so important in meeting the needs of our most vulnerable residents through over the last few years. And this is about how you have benefited residents by working closely in partnership with other organisations, and why. So it's a chance to tell that story. What enabled you to do that? How did that benefit the residents that you were working with? Okay, and that's it. So it is just 3 questions, and hopefully really does give you an opportunity to tell those stories and bring your work to life. Thanks, Claire. I don't know if you wanted to come in and add anything there about those questions.
No, That's great. Thanks, Jenny. I think probably there'll be lots of questions and we'll be able to kind of expand on that and make it clearer to people at the end. But thank you. That's great. So I'll just fly through the next bit. You're probably all familiar with this around, your eligibility. This is the stage where, you have to be an eligible organisation to apply for these. And typically it's those types of organisations that we would be looking for. If you have any questions around your eligibility, and your status as an organisation or a group, please do contact one of the team. The contact details are at the end, and you can they will come. You can have a chat with them about what if you feel if you're worried about your eligibility. Sorry, next slide, please, Jenny. Again, what we can't fund, you'll be probably familiar with this. You must meet the criteria for the scheme. We can't fund retrospective. We're funding for something going forward, not what you've done in the past. We can't, this is all 1 year, so we can't really fund anything that goes beyond 1 year. We'd be looking to start, there's a timetable, but we're looking to start in the summer, so it'd be for a year from that point on. Can't fund capital expenses. We don't provide for contingency or contingent liabilities, activities for religious or political orientated purposes, purchase of alcohol or activities in which alcohol consumption is a predominant theme, and applicants for an individual or where an individual is the main benefit. And that applies across our whole grants programme. Thanks, Jenny. So this is an overview of the dates for the expression of interest for the community infrastructure grant. So it was opened on our website. If you're not familiar with it, there is a page, a community partnership page on our website. The details will be shown later, and all of the application forms for all of the programme are there. The expressions of interest, which is the 3 questions that Jenny's just gone through, that's all it is. That's what makes up the expression of interest. That will close on the 28th of March. During April, we want to have exploratory conversations. So we'll be going back to organisations, trying, to have some exploratory conversations around their expressions of interest. And we hope, it's an indicative, we hope by the 9th of May, we should be able to go out to organisations, letting people know whether we're going to invite them to apply for the second stage. So the part at which you will actually apply for a grant to be a community infrastructure organisation. That will close 4 weeks later, and then there'll be conditional notification of outcome of application in July, because we do have to go back to Cabinet with this. The grants programme is determined by officers but governed by the Cabinet process, so we have to allow time to go back to Cabinet to get approval before we can actually release the funding. But we always normally just let people know that that's the recommendation that we're going to be making to Cabinet, so organisations know whether they've been successful or not. Thanks, Jenny. So when you're ready to apply, you go onto the portal. If you haven't done already, you need to set up a login. Once you've done this, you can go backwards and forwards to the application, to the expression of interest, and update it and change it as you want to. Hopefully we're giving organisations plenty of time to make the application. But if you haven't had a look, please do start now. The longer you give yourselves and the more time you have to read through the guidance, the stronger your expression of interest will be, and you can save your progress. But what we would say is it's easier because the way the portal works, because I've tried filling in an application just to test it. You're probably better off putting the questions into a Word document and fiddling around with it on a Word document, and then cutting and pasting it into the application form. But you can work from the application form if that suits you. Next slide, please, Jenny. The section 1, again, a lot of you are familiar with it, asks you lots of questions around your organisation. Just pointing out that whilst the question 1.8 is not scored, it's all part of your application. It's all part of what's is given to the assessors to understand your application. So it's always good to spend a bit of time answering that. We don't score it, but it all kind of feeds into the information that goes to assessors. Next one, Jenny. So your expression of interest. So that, as Jenny's explained, it's the part of the application that enables you to tell us why you think you should be funded as a community infrastructure organisation. Take your time. I always say this, really read the questions that you're being asked to answer, because that's what you're going to be assessed against. I've seen lots of applications where organisations are doing really good work and they want to tell us about that, but actually the important thing in terms of the assessment is that you're answering the questions that you've been asked, because that's what our assessors will be looking for. Don't be afraid to use bullet points if you think it's the clearest way to get across the ins and outs of your work. And another tip I would is have someone who knows very little about your work, like an assessor would, read your expression of interest. If that person is confused or they think there's some missing key details, then so will the assessor. I know it's often difficult to find somebody who isn't close to your work, who has got the time to do that, but it really helps because the assessor will be coming from the same position. So if you can get somebody who doesn't know anything about your work just to have a read through, and if any of it doesn't make sense to them or it's not clear, then that's going to be the case for the assessor. So I would always recommend that. And I have done grant funding for a voluntary organisation in the borough where I live, and I've always been really surprised at having gone, that doesn't make sense. And I think, oh my God, I should be able to do this. But it is really because sometimes when you're so close to things, you're really not. You're making assumptions about what people understand and know. Proportionality will be used. We generally wouldn't expect the same level of detail from a small grassroots organisation as we would from a medium or large organisation. And that's what we consider, I suppose, as proportionate assessment. And the one thing we are asking for with the expressions of interest is case studies. And I'm sure you already know they can be really powerful. So try to include one, and if possible two, that really bring to life what you've described in your response to those 3 questions on the expression of interest. Next slide, please, Jenny. So how will we assess the expressions of interest? We're anticipating we'll get a lot of applications for this funding. And as we have to say for all our funding streams, we're always oversubscribed. I think generally in terms of the amount requested, we're generally 3 or 4 times oversubscribed for what is in the funding pot. It's a hugely competitive program, the grants program. And I think it's really challenging within the council because there's so many things that are so brilliant that we could fund, but we just don't have the resources to do it. So we're not going to be able to fund everything that we would want to in this funding stream or any of the others. 3 questions have really been designed to really get a kind of granular understanding if your organisation just meets the essential criteria to then be invited for the grant. So that's how it works. It's a kind of like, if you don't meet that essential criteria, then there's no point in asking you to fulfill, go through an application stage. So it's those key characteristics and that work that you've been doing that is the evidence that we want to see to enable us to say, yes, we want to invite this organisation to apply for a grant. Please treat all of the questions equally. They're all equally important. We've tried to design it, as I said, along the lines of them being the essential criteria. And as I said again, please use a case study. And we sort of put together case studies from our own what we'd learned from what organisations are doing. They're not real case studies. They're one we've made up, but they're basically made up from the bits of stuff that we've learned from what organisations have been doing in the community. So just give you an idea. So if you want to look at them, they're in the guidance but they're made up by us. We'll also be using context when we make decisions. And again, what we mean by that, that's all in the guidance. And there is a link in the guidance to the context that we'll be using. And basically what we mean by that is we'll just be thinking about what we already know as the council about what the key challenges are facing Hackney, namely poverty and inequality, and where some of those challenges are concentrated in different parts of the borough. So that's the context. We'll be, that will be in the back of my mind all the time when we're looking at your expressions of interest. And if you actually want to see the detail of that, you can go to the guidance that's on our webpage, and there is a link through to the context that will show you all the information that we have around the challenges facing Hackney and what we will be thinking about when we look at your expression of interest. Next slide, please, Jenny. Declaration, that's just making sure that you fill in all parts of the form and that this has to be completed. If we don't get that declaration confirmed, then we can't accept your expression of interest. And if you're not already on the mailing list for our newsletters, please join them, because I think they're great and I always read them. The grants team do a really good job on putting out really useful information in a very easily readable format. So please do sign up to that. Next one, please, Jenny. So what happens next? As I've already said, I'm going to say it again, we will always receive more applications than we're able to fund. So when you apply, we undergo your initial due diligence to make sure that we're not assessing an organisation that isn't eligible to apply. The expressions of interest will be looked at. The expression of interest will be looked at by council staff and partners from the VCS. If groups are able to evidence the community infrastructure organisations, as we've already set out above, then we'll ask you to submit an application for a grant, and we will try and offer feedback for those people who want it, who are unsuccessful in the expression of interest stage or the second stage grant application. Thanks, Jenny. Next steps, key documents and resources. As I said, everything is on our website. So if you want to, if you go into the council's web page, front page, and you just type into the search engine community partnerships, it takes you straight to the pages where all this information is. And there's detailed guidance on this funding stream. All the questions are in there. And also on our website is general guidance on where you can go for extra support in terms of your application. You can look at in terms of if we obviously want you to submit your best up-to-date policy documents. If you have any concerns about any of your policy documents, there's some self-assessment toolkits to help you review and refresh them before you submit them to others if you want to. And there's some bite-size how-to videos on the website as well. So there's lots of resources available from the community partnerships pages to help you with your application. Thanks, Jenny. As we've said, any questions, please do contact us. We've got an email address that's checked regularly, and we have a phone number, and I think Tom's just put the link to this newsletter in the, yep, that's the link to the grants page on our website and where you can sign up to the newsletter. Hackney CVS, we work very closely with Hackney CVS. They can proofread applications. They are going to be doing an information session on community infrastructure. We're just trying to confirm the date with them, and we will put that on our website, and that will be promoted as well by HCVS. And of course, there's Elba, if you're not familiar with them. They can also be very helpful in terms of helping you to review your funding application, etc. And all the details. Again, all of this is on our website. It's the best place to go to get everything you need. Just bookmark it. Next one, please, Jenny. So, questions. Should we come back to full screen? Ah, lovely. Thank you. So we have hands up, and what I'm going to